Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to Library 2.016, Library as Classroom. This is our second in a series of 3 mini conferences this year. The first was Privacy in the Digital Age, the recordings of which are up on the library20.com website. And then coming up in the fall, we have Libraries of the Future on October 6th. We're really delighted to have you here. Thanks so much to our conference sponsors, the School of Information at San Jose State University, the founding sponsor of the conference, and to Follett and Learning Revolution. For those of you who are live in the session room at this time, look to the left of the map. You're looking for the star icon. If you click on it, it will open up and give you some choices. You click on the star again, and then you can click on the map to indicate where you are in the world. Feel free to put a note in the chat as well. Give us the time, the temperature. There we go, New Zealand, you have made us international. Well, Canada, of course. Looks like maybe Japan, Australia. Oh, how fun. Look at all those great responses. South America. And somehow we accidentally cleared all of those, but don't worry, just keep them coming in the chat. So, Dr. Hirsch, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I'm going to turn it over to you
welcome
and
all
let
of
you start.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to welcome all of you to our Library 2.016 mini conference on Library as Classroom. I'm delighted to welcome all of you and see so many people participating from all around the world. We started as the founding partner for this conference and co-chair with Steve Hargadon in 2011. Of the School of Information at San Jose State University, and it's been our pleasure to work together over these years to provide these free conference series, which we've been doing annually until 2015. This year we took a different approach, and we are offering a series of mini conferences. In March we did Privacy in the Digital Age, and today I'm delighted to introduce our mini conference around Library as Classroom. As Steve said, that we had a wonderful response to this topic, as it's very timely and important for our field. And we've had over 4,000 registrants, which and we're over 200 people who are with us live at the moment, and I expect that to grow. And it's wonderful to see this level of interest in this important topic. Dr. Michael Stevens is the conference organizer for this mini conference, and he is an assistant professor in our School of Information here at San Jose State University. And many of you might know Michael Stevens from his regular column that he does in Library Journal called Office Hours, which he's been doing since 2010, and he also has his blog, Tame the Web, which many of you may subscribe to, and also he is a frequent presenter and speaker. He also just published a new book, and he's the author of the book called The Heart of Librarianship, which was published just this month by the American Library Association. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and he's going to introduce the session today and our keynote speakers. Thank you, everyone, and welcome again.
Sandy, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Hello, hello, welcome. It's so cool to see folks streaming in and to see the stars going up on the map. Wow, I am just thrilled with this. I'm going to advance the slide here. Oops. There we go. Sorry, I went backwards. All right, so welcome everyone. What I thought I would do is a brief introduction, just a few minutes, talk to you a little bit about how this came about some of my thinking about this topic, and then I will introduce the folks that will make up our keynote panel today. I have a brief introduction for them. We'll also get the full link to the full bios into the chat room at that time. And then we'll have some discussion at the end, and then we'll have sessions, and then we come back together for a closing keynote with Sean Casserly from Johnson County Public Library. So thank you again, everyone, for attending today or viewing the recordings. And greetings from Traverse City, Michigan, just to throw that out there. I am in the great state of Michigan. Here, cloudy day today, but summer is here, which is very, very nice for those of us that live up north, as they say. So for me, this topic came about, I wrote a column in Office Hours in 2014 called Library as Classroom, and it was a response to the Horizon report for 2014, which is published by NMC and EDUCAUSE. You know what? I think I'm going to turn my video off just so we save the bandwidth. So I'll wave goodbye for video, but you'll still hear me talking, everybody. Just 1 second. So yeah, the Horizon report published by NMC and EDUCAUSE, they used a methodology in that 2014 go-round called the Elements of the Creative Classroom Research Model. And this is really, really interesting to me. It was created by the European Commission Institute for Prospective Technological Studies. I didn't just rattle that off. I had that here on a piece of paper. And it highlighted some new models for learning in higher ed. But what was interesting to me, and what I always like to do with the Horizon report and stuff from Pew, and any of these things that sort of come into our purview as information professionals, is to apply it to libraries. So the model calls for constant monitoring of how we engage with people and how we provide learning spaces for them. And it asks us to monitor things such as program quality, innovative timetables that allow services and learning opportunities to evolve without, get this, bureaucratic barriers, and to focus on fresh services. This makes so much sense to me to apply a model like this. The library as creative classroom then would offer inspiration and experiences that would help people learn. And this is so broad. When I wrote about this and when I talk about it out in the world, it is super duper broad to me. And it is founded on some of these concepts that you're seeing on the slide here: to learn by creating, to learn by exploring, and to learn by playing. And we've talked about these words a lot. If you've been to any conferences, if you've done online conferences, you've heard these words of late. We're very much in a time that we are seeking experiences that provide knowledge and information. The other thing that the model provides for is peer-to-peer collaboration, meaning we learn from each other. And so in that column, I riffed a bit on what that means for the library as classroom. I think for sure it means a well-trained, user-focused staff who understands how people of all ages can learn socially, and that might be art programs, DIY tinkering, locally sourced expert forums, and online courses, offline courses, anything that you might imagine. So now I'll advance here and I'll watch my time. I want to throw into the mix the four-space model, and I was very lucky to attend a presentation at the Public Library Association this year by Marie Ostergaard from Aarhus in Denmark. Their public library is probably on the cutting edge of public libraries in the world. And this model that you're looking at, the four-space model, was developed by the Danish Royal School of Library and Information Science. And what it provides for, and this fascinates me, is an inspiration space, a learning space, a meeting space, and a performative space. Look at the very middle of the diagram. That's the sweet spot, I think, where learning, coming together, performance, and inspiration can meet. And some of the other words linked to the building of this new library are excite, explore, create, and participate. And along these same lines, let's pull it back to North America, the United States. The Project Information Literacy Group, the long-term research project, I participated in that as an advisor for their study they did on what happens to people after they graduate from college. And this was a very interesting study. They found that new grads do not have the life skills that they should coming out of university. The bit from the report was, today's young graduates prefer lifelong learning resources that have 3 information qualities: usefulness, connectivity, and currency. And again, I wrote about this, and what I think that totally sets us up to be for all types of libraries is community learning centers. For sure for the public library, for the folks that are out of college, but also for the academic library, the K through 12 library, and any other type of information center that folks may encounter. I also think that this kind of study and really these the models that I've introduced just so briefly are sort of a pathway forward and a call to action for us to find ways to engage with folks, to find out what they need and how we might serve them well. It might be designing courses, it might be finding community partnerships to make, to pull folks in and help them learn. So just very quickly, I'll say a couple more words, and then we'll get going with our keynote panel. I use this a lot in my presentations out and about. I love to show this to a room full of librarians, and I'm thrilled to get to show it to 330 plus here, plus all the folks that will encounter it in the recording. It starts with us. That means we need to be learners. We need to think about how we learn. We need to think about learning spaces and everything that we provide. And I argue that these are some of the most important traits we can master as information professionals: creativity, curiosity, and openness to new ideas. That said, I would also say look for new ideas and look for new trends in many different ways. I'm going to say this wrong, and I apologize to any colleagues joining us from Denmark. I wrote a piece about, I'm going to say it, forgive me, hygge. Did I say that? I don't know if I said that correctly, which loosely translates from Danish as coziness. But if you look around, you see people defining it maybe as a vibe, a state of mind, feeling very connected to something and very comfortable. This is from the Anythink libraries in Colorado, and this is some of their signage they have in their libraries, and they actually followed some of the principles that they're doing in Denmark with the public libraries. And again, let me say, I think this spans all types of libraries, to make a very welcoming, warm, and comfortable space. Because if we're comfortable and we feel like we belong, it will be easier for us to learn. The other thing I think we can bring is a sense of compassion and empathy. This is Dozer, a dog we just recently adopted who lives here with Cooper the Labrador. And I wrote about him in office hours, a piece called Talk About Compassion, about what it means to adopt an old dog, a dog that has some health problems, and just what that means for being leaders in libraries and understanding compassion and empathy for the people we serve, and making folks feel comfortable. And we'll get a link into that one. I really am thrilled with the response to that column. And finally, I think we need to approach everything we do and the planning we do for libraries as informal and formal learning spaces is to show kindness. And this was a gift to me from a librarian colleague in New Zealand she presented this to me when I was down there, and I cherish this because it really, she was in a class with me, and it really speaks to what we were trying to accomplish with learning how to approach some of the trends and the opportunities we have. So I think these things are important. I'm going to wind it up here so we can hear from other folks. We need to be curious. We need to often reflect. I think reflective practitioners are the best librarians around. And again, that concept of compassion. So Thomas and Brown, in a wonderful book called The New Culture of Learning, said, where imaginations play, learning happens. What I would ask you all to do, and you're going to, as you spend some time with us here today, as you go through some of the sessions, as we reconvene for the closing keynote, and all the folks that are going to speak after I get done here, let your imaginations wander, see where it takes you, and be very open to new ideas, to finding ways that you might reach the constituents that you serve to offer them learning opportunities, etc. I really, really believe that the heart of librarianship is learning and supporting learning in every possible way we can, from the formal things we do across the desk, to offering classes, to providing space for people to meet, to hosting discussions about various topics, to pulling in partnerships with community leaders. All of these things are what we do, and I really believe it goes back to our mission as librarians. So thank you. It's so cool to see the numbers of folks streaming in, and I couldn't really focus on the comments. I apologize for that. What I would like to do very quickly is I'm going to advance this one more, and I think we'll be getting into Michael's slides. But what I would like to do is run down a quick introduction of our keynote panel today. I so appreciate these folks coming together. I sent them emails when we put this together. I said I'd really like to hear from you. All of these folks inspire me very much. Michael Casey will be first. Michael is currently the Information Technology Director for Gwinnett County Public Library in Metropolitan Atlanta. He coined the term Library 2.0 in 2005. Joyce Valenza is joining us today after 25 years in joyful practice, and I love that word, joyful. As a teacher librarian, Joyce Valenza is at Rutgers University, where she is an assistant professor in the Master of Information program. Jessamyn West is also with us today as part of the keynote panel. Jessamyn is a librarian and community technologist, and she helps run the Internet Archive's Open Library Project and writes a column for Computers and Libraries magazine. And winding up the panel today will be Brian Kenney. He is librarian, editor, and author, also a PhD from the University of North Texas, where I went as well, and he is the director of the White Plains Public Library in New York State and a contributing editor to Publishers Weekly. Michael Casey, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. I'm so excited to hear from our keynote panel, and I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. Thanks so much.
Michael, thank you very much for that nice introduction. I can't tell you how proud I am to be here. You have a great crowd, and I will be very mindful of my time. And if you want me to turn the video off to save some bandwidth, I can certainly do that. So just you let me know. I'll take your cues. You know, the topic as library is classroom is exciting, because I think the library's always been a classroom of one variety or another over the years. But I think something over the last decade and a half, the evolving definitions of library service and really even new definitions of the role of the library itself has allowed us to examine all the things that we do and kind of steer and redirect our resources to really better meet our community's needs. And we see that in a lot of areas. Let me advance the slides here. Part of this focus really has been on libraries kind of repositioning themselves to fill their community's educational gaps with services and programs that really aren't otherwise available to those who, they might be on the wrong side of the digital divide. And ultimately, I think we want to serve our communities and ensure ourselves, our libraries, of a vibrant and viable future. And we can do this by engaging with our communities. And the library as a classroom model really kind of is a perfect fit when looking at our goals as modern libraries. So one question I kind of ask is, what kind of community-based organization really do we want to be? And I would say that we want to play a central role in meeting our community's educational needs. We want to play a central role in addressing community issues, and we can do that in a number of ways, which I'll talk about here. And we want to help our citizens meet their civic challenges. And in an election year like it is right now, I cannot overstress the importance of that last one. I'm convinced that in today's libraries, we've got more learning going on than ever before. And I've been in libraries since 1998, and we're doing more classes and more outreach and more structured and unstructured learning than we ever have before. And I don't think this is more evident anywhere other than really in the STEM-related classes, in the STEM education that's going on out there. We've held many STEM classes in my library. We've done 3D printing, we've done coding, we've done Legos, all sorts of things for all age groups, and it's really very exciting. And when you see the excitement on the kids' faces when, for instance, the picture there on the lower left, the two sisters, the younger one especially, they were learning some 3D design, and then they sent those print jobs to the 3D printers, and that was just so very exciting to watch. And I know everybody out there probably has very similar stories. But it's not just STEM. It's language classes, it's cooking classes, it's meditation classes. It's really whatever your community needs, and not just what your staff want to teach. It's also about partnerships with local nonprofits so that the library's resources and spaces can be used to find and connect students with teachers and mentors. One of the examples I like there is the Philadelphia Free Library's mentoring program for workforce development. LJ had an article on that. You can go back and read about that. It's also about connecting employers with job seekers through shared library spaces. And those can be spaces in the libraries, or those can be spaces that the libraries have secured off-site. And for that, you can kind of see Brooklyn Public Library does something really exciting with the pop-up uni library, where they deploy it in various areas, and they're connecting small businesses and homeowners with skilled workers in the area to provide them jobs. I think this is exciting because people who wouldn't normally cross paths are being brought together by the library in these instances, and they're using library resources and spaces to connect and build these, what eventually become very, very rewarding relationships. These images are from a naturalization ceremony that we actually had at our Hamiltonville branch just a couple of months ago. And what you don't see here is the months and months, and for some of these people, years of classes they attended in order to get to this place in their life. And I can't tell you how exciting it was to see them and all their relatives there at the time. And more libraries are really entering into these new areas of service delivery. One of the things we just started here, and I know other libraries, Los Angeles Public and others, have done the Career Online High School programs. And that's exciting because you're taking a whole group of people who might never have had the opportunity to get their high school diploma, to get a real high school diploma through their local library. It's not a GED, it's a real high school diploma. And most of the libraries that do it try to connect scholarships to these students and talk about a rewarding program. We just got started with it here, but already the stories that are developing are heartfelt, really, really, really good. And we're literally delivering an education, which is, we've always done education, but this is literally a slip of paper, a degree going out to these people. So that'll be exciting to watch. Sometimes a library can also actively work to bring groups and people together to discuss and address some rather serious community issues. And again, this can be done in the library, it can be done outside of the library, it doesn't really matter where. Other times a library can best serve the community by simply providing the spaces for people to come together, not acting really in much of a manner other than a provider of a space to connect. And again, the library connects people within the community by giving them these free spaces or commons for public discourse and deliberation. And that, again, goes back to the whole civic role of the library. Two things I want to point out here. One thing, it's about space. Sometimes that space will be in the library, sometimes it's going to be out in the community. And it can also be a portable space. I mentioned the pop-up libraries that can be tailored to address particular needs, such as career counseling. You can take them out where you need them, pop them up, library staff help people, close them down at the end of the day and go home. It can also be a bookmobile or a techmobile that really goes out and serves as a rolling classroom and connects people to digital resources that are available through their local library. And sometimes the best space that you want to use is not always the most obvious. We've had several maker camps here at my library. We've done them in meeting rooms, but one we actually held out in the teen area on the open floor of the library, and I got to tell you, that was the most rewarding because we had people coming up to us and talking to us. Conversations resulted. Some people actually ran home and got something that they had printed out in other jobs or other places to bring in and show to the students. So that was a really exciting and very participatory sort of thing. Getting outside the library can also be very rewarding. Our training manager here, for instance, he goes out and addresses the teachers during the local public schools and service days. And what's really neat there is he works to show the teachers exactly how many resources we have to offer. And I'll mention this again in just a little bit. But, you know, he uses that time to ask the teachers and show them not only what we have, but ask them, what can the library do for you? How can we make your jobs, your lives easier, and how can we help you serve your students better? One of the other things that it's all about really is connections, and the library is very, very well situated to act as a conduit, connecting teachers and mentors, community services with learners and students, and anyone really in need. One of the things I'm proud of is we just signed a partnership with our local school district, which is going to allow up to 170,000 local school kids use their student ID numbers as library cards, and that will allow them access to all the print and digital resources that our library offers. For many of these kids, this is going to be the first time that they've interacted with the library, and for many of the other kids, it's going to be the first time that they've had access to truly educational online resources at home. So we're very excited about that. It's also a win for the teachers because now they're going to have access to resources that they didn't have access to before. They're going to be able to create assignments and learning plans which can take advantage of this, and it's really going to change their ability of what they can deliver in their classrooms. And everybody that we've been working with on so far is really very excited. Connecting people with quality information can also be very local to the library. For instance, we're doing something here called Book a Librarian, and it's at its basic stages right now of connecting people with reference questions to a librarian who can sit and spend time with them. But it also helps you manage your time better, and we're going to be expanding it so that we want to deliver these things through using technology. For instance, if you're at home and you can use the Google Hangout or Skype or FaceTime, you can sign up for the Book a Librarian. We'll schedule a time. You'll hang out with them or Skype with them. You'll be connected with the best librarian, and we can deliver that information in a managed way. So I hope I'm coming in under the time. I just want to wrap it up by saying all of these things that we've talked about require staff, getting staff out of the library, getting staff time. It's going to require some strategic thinking on the part of your library to create efficiencies in your organization, which then allows you to get those librarians out of the library. I will say we've done some things locally, which I'd love to go into. We've self-service models, removing help desks, freeing staff to get out and do more, but that's a different presentation for another day. So with that, I'll wrap it up, and I will say thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. I'm going to advance to your next slide where you have the suggested reading. There we go. Joyce, are you ready?
Yep, I am ready. Hi, everybody. Should I advance, Steve?
Please do.
Okay, well, welcome, everyone, and thanks, Michael. That was so inspiring, and what I'm taking away from that is, I think, a theme that may be emerging from all the panels. There's really no box. We're not thinking outside the box. There's no box. We can invent as long as we're thinking about our whys, the reasons we exist, our community's needs, and we take risks that are responsible. This isn't brain surgery. No patient will die if we take a bit of a risk and we learn from our mistakes or our missteps. And so I'm excited about the spirit of creativity and the focus on relationships that I see across library land. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a place where library is always assumed to be classroom, and that's our K-12 school libraries, and the important role libraries play as the largest classroom in our schools in our K-12 libraries. And so one thing that I think is really important to know is that we in school libraries have a rather radical mission. And AASL's recent or just year-long mission statement, it was revised, is that they empower leaders to transform teaching and learning. And there is an assumption that teaching and learning need to continually be transformed, and I find that really exciting. I did a chart a little while back on what exactly do teacher librarians teach, and you can see that a lot of this focuses on inquiry and research and evaluating resources, creating and sharing, and on building digital citizenship. But I want to show you a little bit about what it looks like on the ground. I wrote an article for American Libraries, and I wanted to read just a couple of my slides a little bit in more detail because I didn't want to forget some of this stuff. What we do in K-12 libraries, we work with classroom teachers to build creative inquiry projects and assessments. We help learners develop meaningful questions. We encourage learners to critically evaluate, to triangulate authority, to mediate truth, to recognize a source when it's unglued from its container, to make nuanced decisions about credibility of things like infographics or tweets or the authenticity of an image when many of them are born digital. We want students' inquiry to lead to knowledge building, problem solving, meaning making, storytelling, agency, and voice. We also realize that we're working within, we're a learning culture, sometimes working within another learning culture. And so in my mind, in the mind of many of the teacher librarians out there, library is an antidote to narrow curricula and test-driven modern school culture. We recognize that story comes in a variety of formats and learning is not standardized. When I think about what type of learning happens in a school library, I think that we're addressing whole school learning, and these are some of the words that pop for me. The other thing about the school, the learning culture within a larger learning culture is what school librarians do and think about that a lot of classroom teachers don't have time for or cannot do. And so in school libraries, we get to know the whole child and the full range of learners. We know each of their interests, and we know that those interests range beyond solving for X. We offer a safe haven when school is a hard place to be. We see them before and after school. We see them at lunch. We see them at recess. We support the differences. We know that the young woman who comes in for that history project also loves jazz, devours steampunk, has 2 moms, and dreams of being a chef. We also foster self-directed, informal, life-wide learning through our maker spaces, providing genius hours, problem solving through gaming, and merely by being the one place in a school where students are assured that they have choice in what they're going to read and think about. We create reading cultures for our school. And there's a lot more to be teaching in the classroom we call school libraries. Kathy Schrock in her blog and her website identified 13 literacies for the digital age. This is beyond what we traditionally think of as literacy, print literacy. One of them is digital literacy, digital citizenship, which many of us are becoming really want to move our students beyond, and we want them to think about digital leadership. In some cases in schools, librarians are the only professionals in the building who address the development of proud digital citizens and leaders. We teach them to be kind bloggers and tweeters and networkers, to understand and manage their digital and academic footprints, to respect intellectual property when they remix, and engage in new forms of communication and storytelling. Among the things we do is we talk about Creative Commons and fair use and public domain and CC0, and we encourage learners to put Creative Commons licenses on their own productions. We talk about creativity. We understand that communication is the end product of the inquiry process. We understand that participation matters and that audience is everything, and we want to give our students audience. Some of the examples that I've seen are Matthew Winner and Sherry Gicks, Earth Pals Project, their Genius Hour that was inspired by Google, and Genius.com, where they are actually doing many TED Talks and solving problems in their own communities. In the first example, it was environmental, and then it went beyond that in GeniusCon, which was for very young learners. Among the things in our collection now for learning are things like green screens and tripods and cameras and puppets and maker kits and 3D printers and robots and sewing machines and studios. All of this is dependent upon the choice and the needs of our learning communities. I recommend highly Diana Rendina's blog, Diana will teach you how to engage in making for the specific needs of your own learning community. And she has this wonderful video on how to make a Lego wall. But there's so much more there, and there's research there as well. We're engaging in new types of literacy, like data literacy. We've never had the data sets that we have now. So we've got stuff like Wolfram Alpha and Data.gov and Statista and IROPA's iPoll and Nation Master, which allows kids to make things from big data. They can take data sets, create visualizations, and communicate using those stories. We can have kids, this is my lesson on how to make infographics, and this was PSAs relating to issues in Africa. Andy Barrow engages kids in data literacy or numeracy by allowing kids to take over the book budget, survey each other, purchase materials, check those things in, and then share what they've bought with the entire school. We're engaging in global literacy. No longer are we bound by the four walls of the library, so when my students read Thousand Splendid Suns, we invited Afghani women's rights leader in Soraya Paksad, and she talked about Sharia law in a way that my students really just didn't get by reading the book. They learned so much from her experiences, from the experts and authors we bring in. My book club communicated with 5 different book clubs around the country. We brought in authors like Libba Bray, Cory Doctorow, and Laurie Halse Anderson. The kids jumped with delight and actually picked the cover for Laurie Halse Anderson's new book. Andy Plemons engages his kids beyond the little biography project that they had, where they did for Black History Month, they engaged in their own Peace Prize. Using Flipgrid, they had people around the world voting for who did the best argument. And you can see how widely spread the voting was. They also engaged with the developers of Flipgrid, who helped them do a red carpet event, and those kids were delighted. Their audience was huge. Their work went way beyond the postage stamp that was initially thought of as the biography product, and they'll never forget this sticky learning that happened in their library. Collections changed. It's not just what we buy, it's what we point to and make discoverable. And so right now we have the opportunity to put right next to those quality databases a vast array of open educational materials that our government, I'm sorry, this is a kind of U.S. Specific couple of slides, but OERs are big everywhere, and how we need to figure out how are we going to make them discoverable along with the stuff that we normally would put in whatever it is that is our parking lot or our opening space. That's a challenge that we will need to address as a classroom. App smashing is another, tool literacy is another experience we want our kids to engage in. It's not just like go to page 31 and start, or you open VoiceThread and start. It's how am I going to make workflow make sense? How am I going to organize my information desktop kind of life? It could be a collaborative experience where some students work on the initial part, some people gather together in curation, and some people will publish or put into a portfolio. Or it could be an individual experience where kids develop their own toolkit and understand how to manage their information lives that way. And librarians are teaching those skills. I have to say that when Michael and I were talking about this, we got an email from somebody who said, you know, what are you going to talk about, Joyce? Libraries are closing all over our country, and I don't know what the situation is globally. It is happening in pockets across our country. It breaks my heart. It is the best of times, the most exciting time to be a school librarian. It is also the worst of times, because this is an issue that has to do with equity. This was a terrible article I read about in the Pittsburgh area last week, where they decided to keep the library open and eliminate the position because the kids in that school didn't need a librarian. And in the same article, they talked about raising the salaries of the football coaches. And it's just, this article absolutely broke my heart. I'm sorry, some of my slides are not there. The last couple of slides, if you saw them talk about access to the resources and tools of our time as an equity issue, and the fact that if our students do not have that, we need to think about those types of access points as an intellectual freedom issue. And I don't know how I'm doing on time. I could have put more slides in, but it's time. Yay, Steve. Okay, thank you very much. And I think I pass it over to Jessamyn now.
Yep, hi there. I just put a note in with if people want to follow along with the slides locally, they are more than welcome to. My slides are mostly just kind of pictures that I'm going to talk over, but I also have links for more stuff because, like all the time, I have a tendency to talk and wave my hands around, but there's links. If one of the things I talk about is something that's very interesting for you, go on and feel free to read some more and see what you think. So basically, Michael and I talked very briefly, library as classroom, and I'm actually a tech educator. I mostly work for a vocational high school in addition to working for the Internet Archive, and a lot of what I do is help people use computers in order to help them do the things they need to do in their lives. Basically with sort of...
This is Steve.
Yes?
I think you may have the Browse Independently button still on, the red 2 arrows at the top right, because when you're advancing the slides, they're not advancing for us.
I wasn't advancing them.
Oh, okay.
I was still talking. Everything's good. Okay, so when we were talking about library as classroom, right, so people can see this going back and forth? Yes?
You're good.
Awesome, thank you. So when Michael and I were talking about library as classroom, I do tech education, et cetera, and so for me, most of what I do is in a sort of a public library, but also sort of public tech setting as a librarian educated, but not necessarily as a librarian in working in a library. So one of the things that I often think about, and I'm going to specifically talk about here, is the idea of the library just is a classroom. So not as a classroom, but basically that's what it is. And I'm going to use one example of somebody that I talk about and that I work with, and sort of what his thing is and how we help him and why that's what libraries do. So basically most of what I do is work with digitally divided people. I live in a town of 4,500 people in central Vermont, and a lot of the people who live around here don't have access to the internet, or they're just getting it, or they're just learning how to use whatever. So this is Ed. Ed is in his late 60s, probably, maybe early 70s. He's trying to use Facebook because he met a lady that he really likes, and he wants to interact with her and sort of get to know her. But in order to do that, he has to log into Facebook, remember his password, figure out how Facebook and his email work together, and all that other stuff. Super challenging, and if Ed doesn't have a buddy who can help him with that, Ed's going to have a really hard time moving forward with the things he wants to do with his life, which is make friends, maybe find some other jobs. He does some volunteer work, but he would be able to do stuff that was more interesting for him if he could do more with the computer. And so the big deal with Ed is Ed just doesn't need to come to a library class necessarily and take a technology class to understand technology. He doesn't need to understand what technology can do for him. He understands that. What he needs to understand is sort of how technology works in the world as a concept, and then figure out how he can sort of apply that basically to himself. And the big trick here is that Ed needs to learn that from somebody who is not trying to sell him something or tell him that he's doing it wrong, right? I mean, the big thing about Facebook and Google and everything else is that they've got an angle, they've got a thing that they want, and they're often sort of marketing and trying to get demographic information. No big deal, we just know that, they're businesses. But Ed could use a neutral place to get information, and the neutral places, especially when you're outside of public schooling, are fewer and fewer and fewer. So my big thing is I'm really sort of into the crit-lib approach, basically, and one of the things that I found really helpful to me when I started in librarianship was reading Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is all about sort of helping people help themselves. And so he talks about how a lot of education is sort of this banking model where a student is just kind of this empty vessel to be filled up with information from the teacher. So you say, I don't have anything, you give a thing to me, and then I have a thing, but I essentially have your thing. And that's not necessarily a model that's particularly useful. However, what that does is it just basically means everybody becomes sort of teacher bots. Again, nothing wrong with teachers, but what we need is for people to be able to sort of think for themselves and assess how things solve a problem for them. How Facebook solves a problem for me has nothing to do with how Facebook solves a problem for Ed. And what happens is if there are inequalities, inclusion issues especially, those can get reinforced as we get information from people who have a particular slant that isn't our slant. Again, no big deal. Everybody's trying to help here. Nobody's being a villain or a bad person, but people need to find a way to make these real for themselves. And so the sort of angle here is what we need is kind of a worldwide way to approach education as a way of sort of making everybody be a better them, whatever them means. And it's hard, right? Because I might have an idea of like what a better kind of person would be in the world. What a better person would be for me personally. If all of my neighbors were quieter at night, that would be awesome for team me, but I'm not the world. I'm just an individual person, and people need to be able to be better versions of them in order to be fully human, basically, is what we say. And so the word for this, the buzzword, and go look at the links and you can read about this in a way that makes sense for you, is praxis, the idea of informed action, that you're moving towards a better you, reevaluating whether what you're getting is working for you, and educating yourself with the help of tools that are given to you by other people without an agenda, essentially. And so you can look at it as sort of a list like this. You kind of unlearn what you knew, the banking model, which, as people have pointed out in the chat, it can really be a problem with people who are already facing a lot of inequality. You learn the stuff you learn, you relearn some stuff, and you think about it. This part, the quiet reflection, how did that work for me personally? How does that work for my family, for the people I care about? How does that help me with my job? How does that help me with my life that I want to lead? And then you evaluate and you work it around. The sort of fussy way of looking at this is theory, application, reflection, evaluation. Theory, you have a theory, and you guys understand. But you apply the theories, and then you think about, well, how did that work? Then you go around again. So in library school, this was like what we call the ISAR system, information storage and retrieval, and then you say, oh, is it working? Is the system working? And I think everybody else has had terrific ideas about all the wonderful things that they do, and that's all part of this. The big part that I sort of want to stress in the critical sort of librarianship point is wrapping it around. Once you've got a theory and you evaluate it, you make a new theory, and you do this forever. This is your life. You continue to evaluate it. You continue to do this. You continually think about this. And, I mean, that's not the bad news. That's the good news. That's the lifelong learning thing, which I think is delightful. And so my sort of wrap up on this is the library is the classroom where we don't just learn the stuff or the tests, which is becoming more and more of a problem in America, but the library is the classroom where we each learn to be human for what that means for us. And you can replace human with where we learn to be citizens, which nominally is why we have public libraries in America, where we learn to be parents, where we learn to be neighbors, where we just learn to be people. So I think the library is the classroom for after the classroom or outside the classroom or enveloping all the classrooms, and praxis sort of helps us get to be where we need to be on a personal level. Thank you guys very much for your attention.
Hi, Jessamyn. This is Brian Kenney. Can everyone hear me fine?
Loud and clear, Brian.
Okay, excellent. I'm a public librarian. I work in a public library as a director, and I'm really interested in the relationship between learning and space. So briefly, I'm going to look at a bit of the past, touch on literal classrooms, maker activities, collaboration, and finally I want to get to reference, which is I think the most interesting place where learning is taking place right now, public libraries. First, I wanted to reflect a little bit on the past. We have this beautiful Carnegie Library here in front of us. to remind us that we've been having these conversations about public libraries and learning for well over 100 years. Sometimes we actually talked about the library's classroom in the 19th century. More often, it was as the people's university. And in 1909, a Brooklyn public librarian wrote in Library Journal saying, quote, "Let us hark back for a moment to our good old hackneyed central idea of the library as the people's university," that phrase that has been so much and so carelessly used that it has now become woefully threadbare. I'm certainly not threadbare today, but it's certainly something that we've been in dialogue with for well over 100 years. So this slide right here is sort of your classic library workshop. And I think that one of the ways public librarians have made great strides in the last few years is that we really come out of a place with no real culture of pedagogy. And we have really, I think, upped our skills, our more very traditional skills in terms of teaching. And it's ironic because I find that as we have become better instructors, we're actually doing this activity less. This was actually a 3D workshop. You can tell it's a 3D workshop from that poor person in the front row there who's grasping their forehead in pain. But nonetheless, this is something that the public still wants from us, this type of traditional learning environment. I'd like to switch over to maker activities. And, you know, I think that this is, by the way, a shot of a maker activity happening at the Detroit Public Library right on the floor, like Michael said. A lot of, I think, public librarians, when I speak to them, sometimes we confuse the makerspace term with the idea that you actually need a physical space. And makerspaces can really happen anywhere. I think we saw that with Fayetteville, New York, one of the first makerspace activities. And here they rolled it out and it's happening on the floor. I mean, what interests me about makerspaces and I see happening is that it really upends that bibliographic narrative, that what libraries are all about is integrating people and text to solve a problem. And I would back up and say that we've been doing makerspace activities in libraries for a long time. They've been done by children's librarians. They didn't call them that, but Lego is a makerspace activity. Really what we're talking about is teen and especially adult librarians sort of catching up and embracing something. And I really see us embracing something that's very new and almost radical. And we've done so without a lot of conversation. I mean, we very purposely have sort of accepted this idea of learning as a constructive process, that learning is not just reading, it is not a controlled environment, but it is really constructivist learning and enabling that to happen in our library, which in many ways is something very exciting and something very new. And we're also redesigning libraries to enable collaborative, constructivist learning as well. Oftentimes the narrative we hear about maker activities today is about technology, which I think is a little unfortunate. Let me just back up for that. Here's our summer sewing workshop, which is always a really big hit. And you know, you look at this picture, and I think what you see here is you see the experts. We can identify who the sewing experts in this picture might be, especially since this is a program for teens. But it's a participant-driven activity. The participants themselves are deciding what it is that they're going to collectively make. If you were to sit in on this program for an hour, you would see that information and learning flows in different directions. There's a lot of flowing down from the leaders and the experts, but it's also happening across the board here, from student to student, and real, pure learning as well. When we talk about maker activities, this is the sort of thing I think that traditionally comes to mind. Here we have a group of teams who are spending a couple of weeks constructing computers that they then were able to own and use afterwards. And I'm sure that later on today we'll be hearing even more about these maker activities. Switching gears, I'd like to talk about something else that we are all really engaged with in public libraries and space, which is how do we create space that enables learning in different ways. This is Amsterdam's Central Library. And when I look at this photograph, what's really interesting to me is that they're creating a place where people can move the furniture around, where it is technology rich, where people can collaborate, where they can really self-determine what activities that they're going to be engaged in. In many ways, on the public library side, we're looking at what's been happening in academic learning commons and saying, what can we take from that? What is it that we can steal? What is it that we can use? Finally, let's just switch gears and talk about reference for a few minutes. Here we have your very traditional reference desk, and if this enables a human transaction, and I'm not really sure it does because there is so much blocks between the person who might be sitting at that desk and the person who might be sitting in front of it, what it really supports is a transaction, okay? I have a question, you will be providing an answer. And where learning fits into this is the notion that you will go away with that information and you will enable learning by yourself. That the librarian is not the participant in the learning experience here. We're just allowing that learning to be able to happen. This is another shot of a different type of a reference desk. This is in my library in White Plains. This is the sort of thing that we've been experimenting with. When you sort of take reference away from the idea of answering questions, which is really not what people want anymore, and really think, how do we create an environment that facilitates learning? Sort of what Jessamyn was talking about is, where do we create a space where we can create a better you? And in a sense, we've taken that reference desk and broken it apart and made it permeable. We're able to work alongside learners. We're able to work with people for different periods of time. The space is not authoritatively set. It's really set as a shared space. I think the challenge for us as librarians is that this is something that's very new. We haven't been really trained in this sort of on-the-spot learning where you have to assess and develop a curriculum and agree on outcomes, all for something that might be a 15 or 20-minute or half-an-hour transaction. It has design implications, it has management implications, and it's far, far, far removed from that sort of reference interview that we've been spending decades fetishizing. I'd like to close with a quotation from Jim Elmborg, who's written and spoken, I think, so well about this relationship between public libraries or libraries and learning. And he says, libraries are not the center, librarians are not the center of the library. The collection is not the center of the library. Each person who comes to the library to learn and grow is the center of the library. The librarian's role is to locate that center and to help build and solidify it, putting adults in charge of their own learning, letting them articulate what they want to know and how they want to learn it. Thank you so much.
Oh, that was terrific. I'm so sorry. We're so close to the time that I don't think we're going to be able to do Q&A here, but you can go into library20.com and you can send questions to the specific presenters who are registered there. Michael, would you like to say a few closing words?
Absolutely. Wow. I've been furiously writing notes. I've been following along on Twitter. Wow, I am blown away by this. A couple words just for everyone, and I so appreciate the participation of the Keynote panel and all the folks that have been chatting. We can't do this alone, and I really appreciate that we heard that from everyone. What we are talking about is pulling in our users, finding out what they want, and asking them to help us deliver services and to help us help people. We can facilitate partnerships, and I think that was the one question I was going to pose to the panel, and maybe that's a discussion that we can have on Twitter, and please feel free to tweet me or others any thoughts you had. Creating partnerships, nurturing those partnerships, and making user-centered spaces. It's very interesting to think about something so simple as placing the furniture, and then do we get upset when folks move it? And I'm so glad that Brian brought out that little detail. So much to think about in this time together. Please go back, take a look at some of the tweets with our hashtag if you can. And thank you so much. I'm watching the time. I think we're about to hit 4 o'clock, and we have many more sessions to go, and we'll see you back here for the closing keynote. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, and to the panel, thank you.
Oh, cool.